What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Your favorite show, my fucking favorite show to record. It's gonna be a good time. I got a good guest on today. I got Jakob Sanderson. Is that how you say your last name?
That's how we say it.
Jakob Sanderson at FFRTDB. What the hell does RTDB mean? I've never understood this.
It means run the damn ball.
Oh, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I'm a Colts fan, so
Okay.
like we have those ridiculous hats.
Yeah.
You could if people zoom in on my profile photo, you can see the little run the damn ball out there.
Okay.
It's really just an element of self-loathing. Like
Okay.
I hate establishing the run more than pretty much anything, right? Like I'd rather establish an authoritarian government than the run. And yet I root for a team that was supposed to be led by, a generational passer, and then he retired. And my team's identity all of a sudden became establishing the run as much as possible, trading up for a running back, using a backup quarterback on QB sneaks. And it's not great.
Yeah, look, my Jonathan Taylor teams, thank you guys for establishing the run. It's been beautiful. So Jakob, for those of the people that don't know you, if people follow me on Twitter, you probably see me engage with Jakob quite a bit. I think I discovered Jakob through one of his strategy articles from back when he was working at Join the Circle, and I was like, hey, this guy kind of thinks exactly how I think when it comes to trading and approaching Dynasty. So I was like, okay, I'll give this dude a follow, see what he's all about. And you've been putting out some really good content. Now you're over at Player Profiler, crushing it with the nerd over there, the king nerd, the king of all nerds over there at Player Profiler, doing all things numbers, analytics, etc. So you've been killing in the game. But let the people know, let the folks know, let my fellow Wolfpack members know who you are, where you're from, where can they find your work, where can they check out all the dope shit you're putting out.
Man, what an introduction. First of all, I appreciate it so much. I know when I first came in, I love the stuff that you put out because, you don't see a ton of people out there that are really diving into the process, diving into the strategy element, and you always do that. And that's one of the things I really look for in terms of who I follow. And that's why I was so excited to come on. But you can find me, like you said, on Twitter, F_TDB. You can find me a lot on podcasts this year. I co-host the show with Shane and Chase on Wednesdays, and then Fantasy Intervention. And then you find me on Fridays, my own show with Tom Tipple and Billy Milestone, Big Billy FF, the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast. And on Saturday, 2 days from now, I'm debuting my brand new show, No Free Squares. It is going to be a DFS show, specifically tournament DFS. Going to start out as a solo show, but I'll be bringing on some guests periodically. I guess a bit of a similar vibe to this one here in terms of the guests. And yeah, you'll find, I guess, my weekly column now that we're in season as well, called the Pareto Principles. And that's going to be, again, a tournament DFS column. And it's going to be not about players. It's going to be about looking at high level market-based strategies and then trying to see how we can apply that to certain lineup concepts each week. And it's going to be really fun to write.
That's awesome. How long have you been playing DFS? Are you like super into DFS, or are you just getting into it now? What's your history there?
Yes, this is year 5 of me playing DFS, at least in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
It's year 3 of me playing DFS, in a really systematic fashion. And so it started out just sort of as a fun little side thing because I started playing fantasy football and I was pretty young, and I was like, oh, it's daily fantasy football. It sounds cool.
Yeah.
And the more I got into it, I was like, man, this actually fits the way that I think about things way more in terms of, getting out of the minutia of football, which I never played football. So I can watch a football game. I'm not going to present a whole lot of value add in that, but I was like, I can think this through from a game theory perspective and, coming up with constructs for your lineups that make a lot of sense, coming up with, okay, if I'm fading this player, how can I get leverage off of that player with different lineup ideas? That's really the stuff that I think I can provide a value add for, and it's been successful. So I sort of have my joke goal is that I want to pay for my law school tuition with DFS winnings over a 3-year period.
Mm-hmm.
So we're through year 1. We got 2 to go, and everyone gets to play along with me if you stick with my call on my podcast.
Cool. That's awesome. So you're a lawyer or aspiring lawyer, I guess?
Yeah, aspiring if my fantasy football addiction doesn't get in the way. We're in year 2 right now over at UBC, University of British Columbia. So I'm
nice.
Up north, originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Yeah, another fellow Canadian on the pod. You guys can see, man, Canadians just dominate fantasy football. It's just too easy for us, I would say. At least in every league that I've been in. No, all jokes aside, I think there's been a lot of really bright Canadian players. You, Drew at DFB Encounter, and we have a Canadian chat on Twitter as well. A lot of other bright guys in there from True North Football and all those folks. I won't mention all their names, but yeah, I mean, it's cool to see us Canadians kind of jumping in there. It makes sense that, you're a lawyer, you kind of think like that type of way. I'm a finance guy. None of us are really going to sit there and break down film that great, but
I studied economics as my undergrad, so that's where a
yeah,
lot of the stuff comes from, really.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, we're not going to be film grinders per se, but it's easy to think about the game. And honestly, like I've said this so many times, I think like to win at fantasy football, like you should probably spend like less than 20% of your time on player eval. At least that's what I do. I mean, I barely spend
Totally
time on
agree.
player eval just because I mean it's very hard to beat someone else on evaluating players on a consistent basis. You're much better off. Like if I was a total noob coming in and I'll ask for one piece of advice, I'd be like, yo, just look at ADP, understand what other people are doing kind of, and then just apply game theory. And then you don't even have to like watch games you don't want to. Like, I mean, I watch games, it's fun, I love it. But I think there's much room. I would take a purebred like game theory person, and I'd put them into a league and I'd pick them over a purebred film grinder like all day every day, twice on Sundays, just because there's so many other aspects of the game. And we'll get into a lot of that here on the channel. I mean, that's what my show is all about, is mostly about game theory and how to apply some of these strategies. But I think, what I want to know, and maybe what the viewers want to know is, you talked a little bit about your DFS background. What about your like dynasty? I mean, I know you're in dynasty leagues. Like how do you like, separate yourself between DFS, because it's a totally different ball game on DFS, and then your season long league if you do any of those, and then we got like underdog best balls, and then we got dynasty now as well. So what's your history like there?
Yeah, so I do it all. Dynasty is definitely the thing that I'm newest to, which is it's weird because when I started up on Twitter, it was like at least when people started actually following me on Twitter, it was the off season, in which
Mm-hmm.
case it's pretty much just dynasty season. So I feel like I sort of started as like a dynasty account, but
Mm-hmm.
that's really not like my main focus. Like I've been playing best ball since best ball existed. I was out there on draft,
Yeah.
draft.com,
Yeah.
and DFS. Dynasty is something that's really been the last few years, but that's probably the biggest thing that got me into podcasting, got me into coming on Twitter. As I was in dynasty leagues with other folks, and we started up having a podcast pretty much just to roast each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were like, hey, like there's a big pandemic. What if we decided to do this just for regular football, because we have some time on our hands? And that's really how everything started with Full Tilt Dynasty. In terms of my approach in Dynasty, you're right. It couldn't be more different, right? Like the player evaluation starts to matter at least a little bit more, in the sense that you're not just sort of playing this value arbitrage game that's quite as easy. And I think you can take a little bit less of a wisdom of the crowd's approach in Dynasty, in a sense that everyone has multiple different aims. And that's really something that I talked about a lot in that opening piece that you mentioned, which was optimizing your Dynasty roster using the Pareto principle, and specifically market-based principles broad, is that Dynasty has a double incentive structure, right? You have an incentive to try and score as many points as possible and win the league. But at the same time, you're also trying to accrue as much value as possible. And so to me, that really shifts a lot about what positional groups you're targeting, because you're not just looking at, okay, how can I just manufacture points every week, right? You're not really streaming as much in Dynasty because there's like 20 bench spots and you can't just go and pick guys up all the time. And it also really affects, I think, how you look at players' outlooks. But I think that when I say player evaluation matters more, I still think you can look at player evaluation from like an archetype perspective, right? Like it doesn't necessarily mean that if you can't put your hand in the dirt and diagnose what this person's doing coming in and out of their breaks, that you're hopeless. I don't think you're hopeless at all. It's just a matter of trying to identify, I think, players that have asymmetrical distributions, right? Who has a really awesome chance to be a league winner, both on the production standpoint and on a value accrual standpoint. And then who are those guys that are a lot more fragile assets? And the more you can try and attach yourself to assets with asymmetrical upside, both from production and from value, that's where sometimes people think that you're taking these riskier assets a lot of the time when you're chasing these guys, because usually they're younger guys. But really, I think you're taking a safer approach, in the sense that you're maximizing the amount of room that you have to grow and minimizing the amount of room that you can fall. And it's sort of like, to me, I really take a lot of my Dynasty approach from like a barbell type Taleb strategy, right? It's like, if I'm going to pay down for production, I want to get the cheapest possible production. Like I want to just get, we were just talking about Antonio Brown before we went live, right? It's like, that's the kind of guy. If I'm just going to buy points, I want to buy points for a third round pick in the offseason on a 33-year-old wide receiver with AB. If I want to buy youth, that's where I want to chase that upside, chase that value.
Yeah, I think, asymmetrical upside is like, I feel like is like a fancy term that, all of the nerds like to throw around, but not very many people actually know like how to use it or when to implement it. And, I think the understanding like the value curve versus production curve is like, step one in doing that, right? You think about a player, at least I think about a player in Dynasty. And the reason why I say like talent and value is such a small part of it is because like production is only a small piece of the puzzle that goes into the value, right? There's age, there's like hype, there's just a lot of like reading the tea leaves throughout the offseason. But if you understand a player's like production versus value curve, the way I think about it is the value cliff hits like when they hit a certain age, right? So, for
Right.
wide receivers, once you get like 28 years old, you're not going to get like first round values for wide receivers anymore. Like, doesn't matter how productive they are. Like Devontae Adams, most productive 28-year-old, like probably we've seen, in the last like 20, 30 years, still not a first round pick. So,
Right.
these are the things you have to like keep mindful of, where like they hit the value curve. I mean, they hit the value cliff, but like their production's still just, very, very elite and high level. We think about the Julio Jones, like people said like Julio Jones was done. They didn't say Julio Jones was done for like 3 or 4 years, and he just keeps going out and keeps being a baller because the elite guys kind of do that. So I love dumping guys before they hit the value cliff. So before they hit 28 years old, I get out on them and I'll trade down on that asset. Like I'll take a Devontae Adams. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is probably the best example of this. Like, I mean, a couple of years ago, I took DeAndre Hopkins before he hit 28, and I traded him for like Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf. And then in my eyes, I'm like, okay, like these two guys might never be as good as DeAndre Hopkins, but if one of them ever comes close to as good as DeAndre Hopkins, I got another one for free. So I think, that's the move I like to make before a player hits the value cliff. And then once they hit the value cliff, and then they're like, but they haven't hit the production cliff, which comes many, many years later, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years later. That's a great zone to target people and start grabbing guys. You go and get a 29-year-old Keenan Allen, you get a 29-year-old Robert Woods, right? You get a 28-year-old Tyler Lockett, and you just build out your roster with a lot of these guys.
Right.
And the time you do that is when you kind of like hit on that competitive switch and you think you're a true contender. So, those are ways to implement it. I think another great way to implement stuff like that. And good example this year is like DeShaun Watson, right? DeShaun Watson, I think about these types of scenarios as like asymmetric upside, because if you think about the past, like Tyreek Hill was someone I was like, when he was going through his troubles, I'm like, yeah, I'll take all the shares of Tyreek Hill for a second round pick, because if I lose, the second round pick doesn't hurt me, right? But if I win, in some cases you get him for a third round pick. People didn't want anything to do with Tyreek Hill because they thought he was for sure.
Wild.
They thought he for sure was out of the NFL. If you guys remember, like the tape was released and he was talking about like choking and slapping and punching babies and whatnot, and everyone thought he was done, right? And I think those are the stances where you need to take, like where you have to go on the opposing side of the public. When everyone is sure that something's going to happen, like everyone's sure that AB's done, everyone's sure that Gronk is done, and you get these guys for basically free, and you can pay a cost that doesn't cripple your team. You kind of got to go all in on some of those moves. So I do that all the time, and sometimes works out. Like it works out with Tyreek Hill. Sometimes it doesn't work out, like Darius Geis. Like I grabbed every single Darius Geis, on every single team I could when he was getting into trouble. It doesn't feel good because I don't want to root for like a guy that's a shitty human.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm playing the game to win. So, what are you doing with DeShaun Watson? Like, so I think, DeShaun Watson went through a few phases, right? When the news first came out, everyone was like, that's bullshit. Those women are making it up, blah, blah. Then it went to like, oh, there's like 12 to like 15. That's probably a little bit hard to lie. And then now we got in the phase like, holy shit, there's like 22 women who have come out. And at that point, it's like, I mean, I'm not going to say 22 women are lying, right? That doesn't make any sense. Not really rational. Right. And you've seen his value kind of like go up and down. So I myself have fought with this all off season, but I'm kind of curious to hear your take, like in that type of scenario with someone that is a DeShaun Watson, like where were you comfortable drafting him in Superflex startup dynasty leagues? And then where were you like, I'm out? I want you to like basically walk through kind of how you went through that process in the off season and what you kind of went through and what you thought about and how you're kind of addressing that situation now.
Yeah. So I think, I did some of what you were saying, which is kind of just betting against the market. Like when it first came out, I was quite actively selling him actually, because I thought that the market was really underrating the risk. Mm-hmm. Like I felt like in the immediate couple of weeks, it seemed like the assumption, it was almost like the same assumption that there was today on Twitter about like the ridiculous DeAndre Swift murder rumor. Yeah. Right. Like people were almost treating it the same. It was like, oh, DeShaun Watson, sexual assault. I don't know. It's like, yeah, maybe. So I like got out of a few shares pretty quickly for, like 90 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty willing to do that because, I mean, the way I looked at it, especially with potential sexual assault allegations, was like, if this comes up, it's going to drag. And I mean, I'm still shocked that he's not on the exempt list. So I was dead wrong about that.
Me
but
too.
like my initial impression of it was, true or not true, if these are persistent, it's going to drag like crazy, and they're not going to let him play in 2021 with those hangovers head. So I just assumed he was going to be exempted. And so early on, I was basically just treating him as a quarterback with a torn ACL. So my sort of guideline was like Dak Prescott last year after he got hurt, which was basically just, all right, we have an elite quarterback. He's going to miss a year, and then he's going to be back in 2022. As this has gone on, I've definitely factored in more risk that this is more than a 1 year issue, especially if he doesn't get exempted this year, because we could potentially see a situation where he technically could have played this year, so he hasn't received any punishment yet, and then stuff comes out, and then he gets the punishment next year. So it's definitely higher risk. I'm definitely not like actively going to my drafts targeting him. My preference is that another manager will take him. I mean, first of all, because I don't want to root for the guy, right? Like it's 22 women. I believe them. Yeah. I don't have a reason not to. I don't like. I certainly, if I'm starting a new startup, the prospect of rostering DeShaun Watson does not excite me. However, at the end of the day, right, like I'm trying to win money. So yeah, I've been drafting him in like round 5 to 7 range of Superflex startups. Basically, my approach has been, if I can like get him in the range of picks that people are willing to trade a 2022 first for, and people are accepting that for, then I can essentially like have DeShaun Watson be valued as like my proto 2022 first, right? And I think that that's like a pretty good bet to make, right? I mean, we know that rookie picks could easily bust anyways, right? Like if you drafted Henry Ruggs or Jalen Reagor or Keyshawn Vaughn with your rookie pick last year, and that was in a loaded class, you basically got out of it what you'll get out of DeShaun Watson if he ends up missing multiple years. I think that's a really stomachable cost for me. I think like among quarterbacks, where it starts to get interesting is once we get into like the Rodgers, Tua, Stafford type of zone. Yeah, I've moved in behind like the top 3 rookies from this year. I'd rather have any of Lance or Fields or Lawrence actually in Dynasty than Watson. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think I was pretty similar to you. I just started looking like down my rankings list and looking at the quarterbacks. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna give up DeShaun Watson for Justin Fields or Trey Lance or even Zach Wilson, who I warmed up on a lot later on. But I kind of have him like pretty close to them in that range, just because like, you're in that, like, I have him probably ranked like the 3rd, 4th range, but I drafted him in like the 5th round of a startup. Aside from that, I haven't really gotten much of him this year. And I got out pretty quickly too, because DeShaun Watson was on like a lot of my like contending teams. So like that was a problem, because I was like a defending champion. I'm like, all right, well, I got to take a loss to get another quarterback. So I would go and take DeShaun Watson, try and trade up into like a Kyler Murray, try and trade up into like a Russell Wilson, that top 6 to 8 caliber type of quarterback, because I needed someone to win, and I just couldn't afford to wait. So that was like the move that I was making on any, and I had a lot of DeShaun Watson. Like I had so much DeShaun Watson because he was like my quarterback too after Patrick Mahomes. So last season, like he was going like,
he was my QB3, so I had a ton.
Yeah, he's going like the late 1st, early 2nd. I drafted him everywhere. So I had a ton of him that to get out of. I think now, I look at it and it's like similar to you, where like if I can get him in that range of like a 1st round pick, like if things go his way, like, whether it's he misses this year and comes back, or as long as he doesn't get a lifetime ban, basically is what I'm thinking in my mind. Right. If he doesn't get a lifetime ban, like he's going to be worth 2 firsts easily. So, you're kind of like playing that risk, but all this news coming out of like other teams interested, it just feels like there's other people that know stuff that the public doesn't know. That's making me a bit more comfortable grabbing him, but obviously not on any type of contending team. And I think you put it best is like, you kind of look at that 1st round pick range, and if you can kind of recoup that cost, he's not going to go down more than a 1st unless like literally the news comes out that he's like banned. Like even if they come out and say DeShaun Watson not playing a game this year, like people are going to pay more than a 1st for him. So
if I could even bet on DeShaun Watson starting week 1 of the 2022 season or 2023 season, I would sign up for that. Like even if he misses all of this year, I mean, I think we all assume he's going to miss all this year. Yeah. Even if he missed all of next year, right? Like, look at the value of 2023 1st round draft picks right now. It's through the roof, right? People are so excited about Bijan Robinson and Tank Bigsby, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bryce. And they should be. All those prospects seem phenomenal. But like if he's starting week 1, 2023, he would be the 101 of 2023 rookie drafts, right?
Yeah,
like you're not taking any of those guys over DeShaun Watson, who was quite viably the 102 or 103 or 104 in Superflex in February and March, right? Like after Mahomes, that was the conversation. Are we going Allen, Kyler, DeShaun, maybe Lamar? So for sure, even if he misses 2 full years, if he's playing in the NFL again, he's absolutely worth a first round pick in any year. He'll absolutely pay off that cost. I think we have seen this year, like if there's one thing that people should learn, right? If you were in dynasty leagues this year, if you're in a lot, and especially if you're good at dynasty, you probably had a lot of either Akers, Etienne, or Dobbins, or multiple of them, right? Like I think,
or all of the above.
Yeah, like not only are they just 3 like guys, but like those are 3 guys that I specifically think like sharp people were probably on. I think they're really good bets. And if you had them, like you probably went through like an initial depression, and then you probably realized like, okay, I can find a way to manage my way out of this. And right, it's like if that's the worst case scenario, it's like you can manage around DeShaun Watson a little bit, right? Like I had a league, I'm defending champ. Like I fully wanted to compete this year, and I had Akers and Dobbins, neither of which was on my roster last year, both of which I acquired in the offseason, which sucked. And they both went down. And I kind of found my way through it, and I still think I have a team that could contend. It's not as strong as it was going to be, but I still think it can contend this year. And if not, I think the big thing that I really approach in Dynasty is like I always really want to keep my core intact so that I never get into like a full-on rebuild if I can avoid it. Like I think that's the biggest thing I would look at is stuff is so random, and especially playoffs so random. Like I hate the idea that people always say, oh, I mean, I'm going on a tangent now. People always like, oh, I just want to load up for this year because like this year I'm a lock to win. No one is a lock to win a dynasty league ever. Like maybe you're a lock to make the playoffs. You probably aren't even really a lock because injuries can happen. Let's even say you are. Let's even say that your team is so much better than everybody else, and you're going to get the 1 seed or the 2 seed. You're going to get a bye. Like you still have to win 2 games against 2 teams that presumably will be better than what we expect them to be right now because they made the semifinals and the finals. Like you're still probably an underdog to the field no matter how good your team is. And so to me, like I really don't chase those super teams very much in Dynasty. I'm more, especially because I play in a lot of leagues, like I'm looking at it as like, all right, if I'm playing in 30 leagues and I get 25 out of those 30 in the playoffs every year, like I'm probably cashing a profit because I'm just going to I'm going to play educated Plinko, and I'm just going to let the balls fall where they may. And it's probably going to end up being a monetarily positive outcome.
25 out of 30 would be incredible. That'd be an incredible playoff rate. I personally float around probably like the 50-60% range, but that's mainly because I'm a very extremist dynasty player. So I'm probably a little bit different from you in that like my teams are either dominant or they are in a rebuild with a dominant share of rookie picks. Those are the only 2 scenarios you'll probably find my teams. I maybe have like 1 or 2 teams in like the middling range, and that's because I'm trying to figure out what to do with them. And I think what you said is right, that it is random for sure. And even my teams that are like incredible teams, I never think I'm a lock to win. Like there's a team that I finished literally second place every single year. I've been first seed every single year, and I finished second place every single year because in the championship I just run into the buzzsaw for that week somehow. And that's just part of the game. But I do like to stack the odds, and I think like the best way to accumulate value in Dynasty is to like just control draft classes. And the best way to do that is to essentially tank, but like legitimately tank. And, I'll do that sometimes right out the gate from the startup. Yeah. Sometimes I'll take over a shitty orphan that I just have to tank for because they're garbage. Like I had a really shitty orphan that took over, like one of the worst I've ever seen, but I took it over because, it's fun sometimes. And this year I was like, yo, this is my year. I came in, I'm like, I rebuilt this thing. It was a piece of shit and I'm ready to go. Jacob Dobbins, Travis Etienne, Cam Akers, same team.
Oh, dude, same thing happened to me. I did one with a buddy. Like it's the only orphan that I have. No, I have 2, but I did one with a buddy, and he's probably like the best dynasty player that I play with. And we were like, all right, like it was a trash ass team this dude left behind, and it didn't even have its own pick. I think for the next couple of years.
Yeah, the same as mine.
This thing's a disaster. So basically, all it had. This was at the start of last year. All it had Zeke and it had Thomas.
Yeah.
And everything else was like a barren wasteland.
Yeah.
And we crushed the Zeke Thomas trade so hard, at least we thought we did. Like we traded Zeke for Cam Akers and multiple other firsts. And I think we got like another young stud. We traded Michael Thomas for Metcalf, Claypool, Sutton, and a first.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And we were like, we're so rolling. And then we did the rookie draft, and we're like, dude, could we do this 1 year? Because we were planning on a 2 year.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we had Akers, Dobbins, ETN, done.
Yeah.
and we're like, okay, all right, so next year.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes fantasy, just mess you up like that, and there'll be those things. But I do like to live on the extremes personally. Like I don't really ascribe to like anyone can make the playoffs and anything can happen, even though that's true that anyone can make the playoffs and anything can happen in the playoffs. I don't typically like to push my chips into play for that scenario. Like when on my teams, I go into my leagues and I'm like, hey, am I a tier 1 team in here? And if I'm not a tier 1 team, I'm like, all right, well, let me figure out if it's better to kind of push off for a couple of years and kind of blow things up. So I'll have a couple of aging assets. But also like the reason why I like doing that, honestly, is part of it is also just much less grueling on me in the season. Cause like I'll always have like half my teams that like
tank teams are fun.
Yeah. I don't really have to worry
so
about
fun.
setting lineups. I'm just watching values and making trades and making deals. Like I've just been making like blockbuster trades this year. But then sometimes, you get into a zone. The reason why I like doing it that way first, because some people will like trade for assets. Like, all right, well, I'm going to try and go for it. The reason why I like the other way around is like I stock up on a bunch of rookie picks and I don't know what's going to happen. Is it's easier to flip the switch on and trade into contention than it is to trade back. When you're trading out of contention, you're taking a discount on every single player you give up. Yeah. That's just the nature of the beast. But when you're trading in, it's much easier because then you got rookie picks and the people that you're buying from are already trying to tank, so they're willing to sell the discounts. You're on the other side of the table. So I think that's why I kind of like that approach. And it's not for everyone. Like a lot of great players out there always say like you should always try and win. But for me, just success wise, like the juggernauts that I've built have always been kind of through this approach. And there'll always be like a couple years in there where I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to try and win these 2 years. I'm just going to try and build value as much as I can. But then when I turn it on, it's like an instant. You like turn on a faucet and it's been plugged for like fucking 2 months and it just blows up. And that's how I like to play the game. It's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just kind of how I approach it. But I think it's up to taste, right? I mean, everyone wants to win sometimes. Personally, I just don't care.
I guess my thing is like I just don't think you have to choose. Like I think that this is the debate that people always say is like people always slag on the tankers, and I don't think people should slag on tank. I think intentional tanking is a very good strategy, and especially if your team is not above the median value level of the league, you should absolutely tank. Like I hate when people are like, you should go all in no matter what. It's like, no, you shouldn't. That's just dumb. Like if you have the 7th best team in the league, like the last thing you should be doing is like trading your rookie picks to try and get the 4th best team. That's insane. I guess that you have mentioned an example of what you would do with a 28-year-old wide receiver, right? You're like, and you mentioned trading down to Ridley and Metcalf. And obviously that example worked out phenomenally. So here's maybe a difference, like my approach is if I have, like Stephon Diggs right now, for instance, is a guy where I love Stephon Diggs to death. I roster a ton of him. I had a ton of him last year. He was great. Like I'm just pretty sociopathic with how I approach my assets. Like, so Stephon Diggs, like by the end of this year, like he just won't be on my teams probably no matter what, like even on my contending teams, but I'm not going to just trade him for young guys. Like what I would rather do is I'll trade Diggs for Allen and a 23 first, and then I'll add something else. Is just sort of, I just want to replace, to me, like you mentioned those curves, right? Once you're at the peak of that production curve, then I want to buy points as cheaply as possible. The way I always look at it is like, am I purchasing points or am I purchasing value, right? So if I'm purchasing value, then I'm trying to purchase an asset that's going to be worth more when I eventually sell them. If I'm purchasing points, then I'm assuming that I will never be able to trade this player. And I have to ask myself if I'm okay with the price that I'm paying, if that ends up being the case. And I guess like with guys like Diggs, with Adams, with Hopkins, like I'm less okay purchasing those points. They come at quite a high price. Whereas guys like Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, I mean, Amari Cooper's younger than those guys, but he's just valued lower because people don't like him for reasons unknown. Like to me, that's just a much more attractive sort of way to store my value in those contenders. And then I'm always supplementing that with younger guys. And, I'm always going to be overweight on picks. And I guess that's the one thing is if I have contending teams, I'm just very intentional about like what I'm willing to trade to make them a little bit better, because I'm willing to go in on a contender, but I just never want to I never want to make a team that's already good necessarily all that much better by minimizing my window. Like my attitude when I have a contending team isn't as much like, how can I get more points onto this roster? It's usually two things. It's like, how can I store my points that I already have most efficiently? As in like, how can I optimize my starting lineup at the expense of my depth? And then how can I extend my window for as long as possible? So like if I can trade, a middle-aged running back for a younger running back who I think can produce the same this year, I'm going to do that. Trade an older wide receiver for an equally old wide receiver, get 90% of the points and add a first-round pick, I'm going to do that. And I'm just sort of tinkering on the back end so that I never have to rebuild. Like I've done intentional tanks out of the gate for sure. But like my motto to me is like, I'm okay tanking once. I never want to tank twice with the same team in my life. That's like my number one goal in every league is don't tank twice. As I think like once I've accrued that value, then I just want to try and institute that asset loom where I never have to go back to the dark days. I want to be making the playoffs every year unless, there's catastrophic injuries hit obviously, and then you have to adjust. But that's really my goal. I'm never trying to retank a team if I can avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's avoidable, you definitely don't want to do that. I mean, you want quick tank turnarounds, and you don't want to be like tanking for year after year after year. But sometimes, like, I mean, shit just doesn't go your way, and you kind of you need more than 1 year to turn something around. So in those years, I'm always trying to push the value back by acquiring draft picks. I think I want to touch on a point that you said that actually I really like is, when you're a contender, you're trying to think about buying points versus buying value. I haven't really done like that specifically, but I think one thing that we're really common on is, I talked about the value cliff for wide receivers, and wide receivers is probably the easiest like money printing business in Dynasty, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can't trade away like stud young running backs if you're actually trying to win. In my opinion, I mean, zero RB people will tell you otherwise. But in my opinion, if you're actually trying to really win and hit the ceiling of your team, like you're not trying to trade away Jonathan Taylor, right? 21-year-old, 22-year-old running backs. People don't put those guys on the block too often. But wide receiver is one where like in every year, there's only like one or two like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs type performances that are difference making wide receivers, right? But like the other wide receivers aren't really changing the outcome of your win percentage that much, to be quite frank. Like even DK Metcalf's, AJ Brown's, the guys that people absolutely adore and love, right? That I think goes to your like value thing. Like those guys store value great, right? But from a production perspective, they're not necessarily moving the needle. And whenever I get to that scenario and I see a wide receiver, anytime a wide receiver is in the discussion for the wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty, he is on the trade block. Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, all these wide receivers, as soon as they hit that peak,
trade Brown. I love him too much.
As soon as those guys hit that peak, yeah, it hurts. But it hurts because the reason why I love it is because there's so much demand. Like, nobody wants to trade for a DeAndre Hopkins anymore other than contenders, right? But everybody will trade for a DK Metcalf. I don't care if you're a contender. I don't care if you're a rebuilder. That's a great core guy to build your team around, right? So you have a lot of demand. You can drive a lot of prices and you can get a lot of value. Like people always, the one thing I can't stand about like fantasy Twitter and all the advice and people that create these articles, like, oh, like sell high. It's like, oh, it's time to sell high on DeAndre Hopkins. Like, no, that ship sailed like 2 years ago. That was your sell high. You can't sell high some shit. If someone wrote an article that says sell high, chances are that's not a real sell high, right? Like
exactly. Yeah, sell high on Ezekiel Elliott after tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Good
So,
luck.
like the real sell highs are the articles that aren't being written. Like Devontae Adams last season, midseason.
That's what I'm saying. This year, Diggs is the sell high wide receiver. It's not Adams or Hopkins anymore. It's Diggs, which
like
breaks
Michael
my
Thomas
heart, but that's who it is now.
After his record-breaking year, that was the sell high. But how many articles did we see about selling high on Michael Thomas? None. Everyone's saying you got to draft him in the first round. So, I think the way to think about it is anytime a wide receiver is in discussion for Dynasty wide receiver 1 overall, anytime a wide receiver is hitting first-round startup ADP, there's no more room to go. So you trade down on those guys. I don't care if they're young, they're old, or whatever. You trade down on them because there's a good chance that whoever you trade down to at wide receiver is going to replace that production at 85, 90%, and you won't miss a beat. And second of all, whatever the additional piece you get on top is also has massive upside. So typically I like to trade a wide receiver and I trade down a few tiers plus a future first round pick, whether that's 2022 or 2023. I loaded up on a lot of 2023 picks early. It's probably harder to do now because everyone loves 2023, but I'll take a 2022 first too.
But in home leagues, it's not, right? Like in your home league with Walter from the water cooler, like he doesn't know who Bijan Robinson is.
Yeah.
you're like, he's going like, oh yeah, 2022, that's 1 year away. 2023,
yeah, exactly.
that's 2 years away.
He's
but
reading,
that's how 80% of real people are that aren't on Twitter.
Yeah. He's still reading like PFF articles that had Bijan Robinson as a sleeper candidate for 2023. So you have a lot of those regular Joes. But I mean, if you're in more leagues in the know, it'll be a little bit tougher, of course.
Yeah.
But like, one guy I love trading for this year was Brandon Ayuk, and he's gone a little bit higher now. I love trading for Chase Claypool. I feel like they're in that zone. Like it's like, the way I think about it is everyone loves trading back, right? In Dynasty startups, that's like the thing now. Everyone does it. It's great. I love it. Everyone does it, and it's like the boilerplate vanilla strategy.
Even just this year versus last year. Like last year, I was able to trade back so much more easily than this year, which is crazy. It's only been a 1 year difference. But like I remember last year I had like the 1-6 in a startup, and I got like a 2-4 and an 8 or something. And this year, it's like if you want to trade back out of the first round, like you probably get a 2, and then you're like maybe hoping to get someone's like, I'll give you a 9th on top and a 22 third. It's like, man, will you add in KJ Hamler? It's just tough.
Yeah, it's definitely tough, but like that type of mentality should carry over into after the startup. But you don't have to just do that in startup. And my way of doing that in season is taking wide receivers that have first, second round, third round ADP and trading it for a wide receiver with like 4 or 5, 6 round ADP and getting a future first, right? So that's essentially taking like your third round pick and trading it for a 5th and a future first, which is a great deal in any type of scenario. So, taking like a Calvin Ridley and trading him for Brandon Ayuk plus a first, I did that deal. And I'm like, I mean, maybe I take on a little bit more risk and Calvin Ridley has a ton of upside, but there's a chance that Brandon Ayuk kind of matches 80% of what Calvin Ridley does. And then there's a chance that 2023 first I get is worth more than both of them combined. So, that's the way I kind of think about it. And you break it up into more production and value.
Yeah. Like I think I do different trade structures than you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I really look at it from like an arbitrage perspective, right? So I don't think Brandon Ayuk is the arbitrage Calvin Ridley. Like I think that the arbitrage Calvin Ridley is Allen Robinson. And so it's like I want to like get older than Calvin Ridley, and then I'm going to get a first, and I'm going to get a prospect. And so it's like, all right, now I'm going to get. So I'll trade Calvin Ridley. Actually, I'll use an example because Diggs is the one I missed on Calvin Ridley, and I was just a big dummy, so I've never rostered Calvin Ridley, so I haven't been able to trade him away because I'm an idiot. But like Diggs, so I traded Diggs for I believe it was Keenan Allen, a 23 first, a second, and Waddle.
I mean that is a lot of so Diggs for Keenan Allen 20.
So let's even say I'll say
Waddle.
like that was a smash for me, but like let's make it a little bit worse. So it's like a deal that I would be like content with, but not smashing, right? So let's say Diggs for Allen, a 23 first, and De'Ami Brown. Okay. So like to me, then it's like, all right, I'm going to get Allen, who's going to give me 90% of Diggs production. So he's still fulfilling the same role on one plane, right? So that's covering me at the points level in that market. And then on the other market, the value market, that's where I'm going to get my 23 first, which I'm going to put to good use because I'm going to draft rookies at a better rate than my league mates. At least that's what I'm betting that I'm going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And then, and then I'm going to try and get like a wild card in De'Ami, where that's a guy that maybe essentially if he elevates, right, then maybe that's another guy that I can trade for a first down the line.
Yeah.
And that's really like what I'm trying to do over and over and over again is like, I'm trying to win on both planes. I don't want to just win on one plane. And that's really my whole thing about like #never rebuild. It's like, I'm always trying to replace the points and replace the value at the same time if I can. So to me, like the arbitrage works differently with like young guys. So CeeDee Lamb, for instance, although bad night to say it because he had like 100 yards and a touchdown, but like he was a big sell for me this offseason because I was like, all right, well, I know he's on the Cowboys and so they'll probably score 1 million points, but he didn't like by the numbers, especially as just a rookie, he didn't have a demonstrably more impressive season than T Higgins and Chase Claypool and Brandon Ayuk, at least in the NFL. So it's like, all right, now, so if I'm going to arbitrage Lamb, right now, I'm not like a lot of people are like, oh, trade your rookies for proven studs. No, that I do the opposite in this case. I don't want to trade Lamb for A-Rob. I want to trade Lamb for Ayuk or Higgins or Claypool and then get either a first on top or I want to get a veteran on top, right? So I'll trade Lamb for Ayuk plus, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know. Odell Beckham, right? It's like, okay, so I'm going to like move down to a wide receiver that I think has like actually a pretty similar shot. Like I think I'm accepting pretty similar risk. Maybe the ceiling isn't quite as high just because of the offense, but then I'm also going to add points in my lineup to make up for that. That's sort of how I'm viewing it as like trying to find these arbitrage partners on both of these market curves.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, I didn't really view Ayuk as an arbitrage play. For me, it's just like I'm trying to accrue value. I mean, even on my contending teams, I'm trying to accrue value because, like I said, like my contending teams are like really contending teams. Like if you see some of the teams, like I could lose Diggs for nothing and be fine. Those are the types of teams I'm talking about. So I'm always trying to still accumulate value.
Mhm.
And so when I trade down, like Keenan Allen's someone I love, so that's a bad example. Like I'll just grab him on any contending team that I can because I think he's fantastic. But most of the time, I'm still trying to, like you said, extend my life, but also build my value. And I found like I've been able to do kind of both, and maybe that advantage kind of goes away. But I really don't feel like I've had to choose too much
Right.
between production and value. Because I'll get a young guy that's productive, or you know what, like I bet on a young guy. Maybe it's just that I've
Yeah.
gotten lucky betting on young guy after young guy, but I feel like that zone, that like fourth round to sixth, seventh round zone of wide
Mhm.
receivers has always had very fruitful bets for me. So Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. This year, I think Brandon Ayuk, Chase Claypool kind of fall into that
Right.
zone, like very productive young guys going into the sophomore season.
And
So
historically, that's the best bet in all formats, right?
yeah,
Like second year breakout wide receivers that drew targets the first year and
yeah,
were, day one or day two prospects. Like that's like the best print shot bet you can make in dynasty and redraft, frankly, too.
yeah, exactly. So look, I think we have like slightly different approaches, but the underlying principle is the same. Is like, how do you stay in this contention zone? How do you stay as a contender? You're not just because you're a contender doesn't mean you can frivolously start burning your future draft picks for rentals like Mike Davis, or whatever rental you want to rent.
And
Um,
if you're really a contender, you don't need Mike Davis.
yeah, that's what
That
I
should
mean.
be
So
the sign, right? Like if
yeah,
Mike Davis is making a meaningful impact on your roster, then you're probably not the contender that you think you are.
yeah, exactly. And I think that is part of it. If you don't have depth, right, and that's the depth you're trading for, and you're giving up your future to do that, I think that's when I kind of you should probably step back and reassess if your team really is a contender. I think Adam Harstad had said something on Twitter that kind of really stuck with me, and something that I do as well is like I never trade away like flexibility, even as a
Right.
contender. Like there's really no need for you to go all in and try and acquire like the Mike Davises and the Gus Edwards of the world now. I mean, you might as well play the
Right.
season out and see what happens. What happens if you trade for some of those guys and then you lose CMC or you lose Saquon Barkley
Yes,
to an injury, right?
exactly.
There's no upside to prepaying for guys like that. So it's always like a little bit of a balancing act. And I think, we kind of have a very similar approach. And I think that's how you stay in the zone, right? So, you said something, you only want to rebuild once. And I think that's true for the most part. Like, I mean, I've been playing Dynasty for like 3 years, and like my true contenders, like, they're kind of like in cruise control. So I haven't had to rebuild yet, but I can see like, maybe it's like year 5 and I've gotten a couple belts, a couple championships under my belt. And now, some of my guys are aging out, and I wasn't able to trade them at the right time. And then you have to like kind of pop the rebuild switch a little bit. But for the most part, you kind of want to keep building on. I call this term like the Iron Bank. Like I have contending
Yeah.
teams where I'm a contender and I have all these studs. I have like 10 guys in like the top 40, but I still have like 3, 4, 5 rookie picks, like rookie first round picks in the next 2 years. So I'm constantly trying to replenish that. And the way you do it is by what we talked about, sometimes through wide receivers, sometimes through quarterbacks. Even I think this year trading down a quarterback has been
Mhm.
incredibly
I
fruitful.
think trading down a quarterback is fruitful every year.
Yeah, every year, but this year just especially because of how valuable the quarterbacks are. I mean, you have often 10, 11, sometimes 12 quarterbacks flying off in the top 15 picks. So it's been very fruitful. I mean, trading down on guys like Joe Burrow, like if you can take Joe Burrow and trade him into Ryan Tannehill plus a first, which I'm sure you can do actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
Those are the types of moves you kind of want to make on your team. And taking like you know what do you call it, like Josh Allen, as good as Josh Allen is, right? You could probably get Ryan Tannehill plus a first plus. And yeah, you'll
Oh
lose a little
yeah.
bit of production on the quarterback, but the amount of leverage that you get on the back end is just too valuable to kind of pass up. I mean, Russell Wilson for Ryan Tannehill plus a first. I mean, Russell
Totally.
Wilson and Ryan Tannehill are the same age,
Or just trade Josh Allen for Russell Wilson and a first, and then trade Russell Wilson for Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, exactly. You just keep trading down that train. So, I mean, there's many ways to do it, but you always want to keep a steady flow of assets coming in. You don't really want to be in a position where you just like never have any picks. And because if you don't have any picks, you don't get to participate in the draft, which means like that all that means is everyone else is capturing value except for you. So
right. And it hurts you on the trade market too, because if you're a contender, like you always want to be aware of the other people you're contending with and what their buys are, right?
Yeah.
And you want to be aware of the market. So if you're in a league where most of the contenders don't have first round picks in the next couple of years, and you're one of the ones that doesn't have first round picks, like the one contender in your league that does still have their first round picks is going to get just awesome buys at the trade deadline. Yeah. Right. Because they're in their own market. Like someone's going to be you're going to have all these sellers that are going to be looking to sell off their pieces. And there's going to be like one or two guys that have the picks or that have the youth. And they're just going to be able to get absolute steals. Right. Whereas at least if you have those assets, like you're keeping your flexibility for the future, you're also keeping some flexibility on the trade market where like, even if you don't end up landing it, like even if you don't want to trade the pick necessarily, like you can at least use your stack to keep your competitors a little bit more honest. So they're not just being able to just stack in stars at like a 50% cost because there's no one else that can compete with their offers.
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I mean, that's a great point that, I haven't brought up before either. But, I always talk about controlling the market, right? Whether that's a rookie draft, whether that's a tight end market, whether it's whatever resource is really scarce and easy to control. I'm always trying to get control of that because that dictates pricing, that dictates how other people act. So, in the scenario that you said, like if you're the only contender without a first and other people are selling age veterans, like you're going to see deals where people are trading away, Julio Jones for like a second round pick, and you're not gonna be able to do jack shit about it. And it's gonna screw you because those are actual difference makers that get on the aging end. So
I did this in a home league. I did this in a home league last year where it was a very weird divide where like there was 2 or 3 guys that were fully tanking and they had a ton of picks. And then there was like a top half of us that were contenders. And of that, there was only 2 of us contenders that still had draft picks the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, I remember I was talking to a couple of the rebuilders, trying to get a couple assets off them. And I knew that they were also talking to this other guy. I was like, man, this sucks. I'm going to get stuck in this bidding war. And I was like, actually, it'd be a better idea is I just went to the other guy who had the picks. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm top 3 this year. I think I'm like 4 or 5. I'm going to fold up shop here. I'm going to sell you 2 of my top guys, and I'm going to get your next 3 first round picks. And then I did that. And then I was like, all right, now I have 5 first round picks. No other playoff team has any first round picks. And then I'm just going to go buy the other guys from the people. And now there's no bidding war anymore.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome.
So I just was like, all right, I'm going to make you pay 120% of the costs because you would have to pay 140. And then I'm going to go get the other guys way cheaper than they were selling them for 2 weeks ago. And it was really successful. I mean, it takes knowing your league mates, knowing their tendencies, but I do think it's an element of market control. And I want to pick up on one other thing you said, because I thought it was so sharp, is the timing of when you trade for depth. I thought it's something that I've talked about before, and I love that you said that. It's like trading for depth now is so purposeless. There's like so many more, like if you think of like the nodes, right, and all the different potential outcomes. So there's really only like one outcome where trading for the depth now makes sense, right? And that's where things go mostly according to plan, right? It's like your starters are mostly good enough that you're gonna still want depth, but not like so good that you don't need depth, right? If you don't trade for the depth right now, like what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? So option 1, all of your starters get injured, and the depth that you would have traded for wouldn't have helped you, and you're just gonna try and offload that later anyways, right? Yeah. Option 2. All of your starters perform great and you don't actually need any depth because everyone stays healthy. Option 3, random guys on your bench that you didn't think were depth pop, and all of a sudden you actually do have depth that you already had. You didn't have to trade for. Yeah. Or option 4, things go where you would have wanted depth. And if you actually have a contender, you can probably win without it for a few weeks, and then you just trade for it later and you'll be fine. Like how many times do you have a player in your lineup suck and you win anyways? Like, often, like you're never going to have every single person in your lineup go off every week. So it's like, so what if for a couple of weeks you got to roll out, Tony Pollard at RB2. If you have to just stomach that for 2 weeks, it's like, okay, like that's fine. Maybe what did Tony Pollard have tonight? He had like 7.5 PPR points. Yeah, it's not good, but like what, who's going to have 7.5 PPR points? Josh Jacobs on Sunday.
Yeah. So yeah, it's totally like, people try and plan for the perfect scenario. And my entire philosophy when it comes to Dynasty is just embracing chaos. And the reason why I love trading back, and the reason why I love, trading for future first and trading down on top tier assets, is because there is going to be chaos in the NFL season. There's going to be so many things that we cannot foresee, and I want my teams built to be able to handle that. I don't want my team to be so concentrated that if I lose one or two players that I'm fucked. I want my teams to be able to handle, like, an ACL injury. Like, one of my top contending teams, I literally lost Travis Etienne, and then I lost J.K. Dobbins, and that team is still a top team because I've built for depth over the years, and I love having that type of stuff. And when you build for depth, the beauty of it is naturally you're acquiring assets that have way more upside, because once you're in the first round of a startup pick, there's really nowhere else for your asset to go. But if you are acquiring multiple assets in the third, fourth, fifth rounds, those are the guys that can make a leap into that next year, right? If Brandon Ayuk goes out there and balls, he's going to be a second round pick. If Chase Claypool goes out there and has another big game, he's going to be, people are finally going to let go of their priors, and he's going to be like a second round, third round pick. So, naturally you protect
Some people
yourself.
will never
against,
let go of those priors.
you naturally protect it against the downside, but somehow ironically also acquire a lot of value upside. And that's what I really like about like the approach to Dynasty, where you don't know what you don't know, and you kind of prepare for the worst. And if things go your way, great. If they don't, you at least have the flexibility, and your team has the ability to kind of take those punches, right? So I know you talk about embracing chaos a lot on your best ball teams, and that's a core theory of zero RB as well, is kind of embracing some of that chaos. Not that I'm a zero RB drafter by any
But
means,
I think there's a difference though, in a sense, between what you're outlining, and I think there's an interesting difference between Dynasty and best ball redraft.
Oh, I mean,
Because I'm a very, very zero RB guy in, well, usually more hero RB, but zero RB like from a structural, theoretical perspective in best ball and managed redraft, but not at all in Dynasty. And I think something you brought up is really interesting in terms of like the classic gospel of zero RB is like often linked back to Taleb, right? So it's like anti-fragility, things that benefit from disorder. And they talk about the difference between, robustness and anti-fragility, in the sense that robustness resists chaos and anti-fragility benefits from chaos. And I think the biggest reason why I believe an anti-fragile structure is better in managed leagues, best ball leagues, redraft leagues versus Dynasty, where I actually think a robust structure makes a lot more sense, is first of all, it's the starting plane, right? And it's the win equity. So I think in a best ball league, it's like everybody starts from zero. In a redraft league, everybody starts from zero every year.
Yeah.
So your only edge over the field is your skill edge, which is hard to quantify, right? But your just neutral expected value, if you have 12 people of equal skill, is just 8.3%, right? Whereas in Dynasty, if you're a contender, like your win equity is probably much higher than that when you start. So I think it makes a lot more sense to build in a more robust fashion, right? Because the benefit that you get from chaos is directly proportional to where in the distribution you need to be to win, right? So like what I always say about in best ball, I'm always talking about tournaments are won in the tails. You don't need to worry about the thickness of your distribution, because that's not where you're winning, right? Like you're winning on the tails. And so if that means like that your floor is lower, it doesn't matter, because you need such a high ceiling to be able to win one of these tournaments that you just need to focus on, the width of your distribution curve overall. But in Dynasty, that's not true as much, right? Like if you have one of the best teams in a Dynasty league, and you probably have like 30% win equity or 25% win equity, or even from a value perspective, you have the most valuable roster in the league, like you have something that you want to preserve, right? So you do want to be a little bit more resistant. I think you do want to protect yourself a little bit more. And I think that that's one of the fundamental differences to me between the zero RB approach, is that most people, I think their natural intuition is to say, yeah, in Dynasty, I want to bank wide receivers because they have longer careers. And then in redraft, I want running backs. But I don't really think that that's actually true, because I think in redraft, when I look at, it's like, what's the cheapest pathway to point purchasing, right? Because I think that what I really build my high picks around is like, there's such a high opportunity cost around early picks in any format. I'm always like, okay, like what can I purchase? What points can I purchase most cheaply? And in redraft formats and in best ball formats, it's like, it's definitely running back, in my opinion, because I can get a guy off the waiver wire in redraft. I can get next year's Gio Bernard or Wayne Gallman or Mike Davis or whatever guys. Like I'm gonna have guys that are gonna perform the same as what you'd expect from a running back in round 3, 4, 5. I can just get those guys off waivers, so I can purchase those points for nothing. I want to use the high opportunity cost at points that are more irreplaceable, and that usually comes a wide receiver because targets are earned. So usually, like the only way that a wide receiver off the waiver wire becomes an irreplaceable asset is that they're just way better than everybody thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm usually drafting the guys that I think have the best profiles to be that way anyway. So, whereas running back, like, you can just walk in and get gifted touches, right? Like Tyson Williams might be an RB1 this week. He's not probably any good, but like he's probably going to get 15 carries against the Raiders this week, and you're going to start him, and he's probably going to be fine. He's probably going to outscore Jacobs in that game. Whereas, in Dynasty, it's not the same way. Like, to me, it's like I hear about zero RB from perspective in Dynasty, and it just seems like an expensive house of cards in a way, because you're kind of shuffling through these running back points. It's like, okay, I can get these guys at cheap, but it's like it's almost death by 1,000 cuts if you're continuing to shuffle in these James Connors and Leonard Fournettes and Melvin Gordons. And it's like, yeah, like I understand that those guys can be serviceable, but you're really hurting sort of the scope of what you can build long term to continue to concentrate assets on these guys who are just going to expire on your roster at the end of the day. You're never going to get more than you sold. And so you're just steadily losing your value cap, hoping that you can hold it at wide receiver. Whereas in Dynasty, like wide receivers that are going in the third freaking round in redraft are like incredibly cheap, right? Like you can get Robert Woods in the freaking 9th round of startups sometimes, in the 8th round of startups. And he's a round 3 pick in redraft, and you can just get him for whatever you want. Like if you want Robert Woods in your Dynasty league and you decide tonight that you would like to have Robert Woods in your Dynasty league, you will have him by the end of the night, because I guarantee you the person who has him is probably quite willing to move them. And I think that it totally shifts the paradigm to the point where the guys that are irreplaceable are the running backs that both have the opportunity to provide irreplaceable points and to have value that will continue to accrue, because there's so freaking few of them that I just want to touch those guys like they're gold. And now there's even fewer, because 3 of the guys who fit that kind of profile are on my freaking injured reserve.
Yeah, got it. I mean, yeah, it totally makes sense. Like it's definitely a different path for like Dynasty and redraft. And I'm not usually a zero RB drafter, but I mean, I just draft like what I go with the flow of the draft, whatever it is, and I'll do a zero RB if I'm picking late and all the values are wide receiver. I'll do a hero RB if the values are wide receiver. It seems like that's the cool thing to do these days from the cool kids. I don't really identify with any specific draft strategy. I'm gonna be honest with you. I kind of just go with the flow, and I'm just pretty flexible. So it's always cool to see, there's people that are heavily like zero RB. There's people that aren't. And the most interesting about zero RB for me is like, I feel like a lot of people that are like steadfast, like hardcore zero RB, not a lot, but some out there on Twitter don't even understand like what zero RB is. I'll get into a debate and they'll be like, oh, well, I mean, I took Joe Mixon in the 3rd because, that's where the value was. I'm like, well, hold on, like that's not, then you're not drafting like zero RB. That's like the entirely against the principle of what you're trying to do. So I think there's a lot of confusion out there, but
what do you think it is then? Because I think that you can have a zero RB mindset and draft Joe Mixon in the 3rd. I think you can.
I mean, it depends what you're trying to argue. I mean, because like zero RB is like, now it's like hero RB, right? I mean, I made a joke, like eventually it's going to be like modified however many RBs I want plus wide receivers, and that's like where we're gonna go, and people are just gonna keep changing because like, oh well, now the value's here, now the value's there. Like at the end of the day, I mean, I like if the concept of zero RB is anti-fragility, right? And you're sitting there in the 3rd round and you're having to choose between a Joe Mixon and what's a good wide receiver that's going in the 3rd these days? Like, is AJ Brown still going in the 3rd? He's going in the 2nd now.
It'd be like Keenan, CD, Allen Robinson, McLaurin.
Yeah. So like Keenan Allen and Joe Mixon, right? I mean, you should be picking Keenan Allen, right? I mean, because then you're gonna go back and you're gonna have your wide receiver set, and you're gonna get like whatever, like Chase Edmonds or Miles Sanders in the 4th or 5th or whatever. I don't think it's like so confusing to me, because like the whole concept of anti-fragility is that like you're betting on your team to better sustain injuries, so you can take advantage of the waiver wire, like you said, of this like really cheap production they can get back. And then like it's like, oh well, now based on my subjective analysis, like Joe Mixon is worth a 3rd round pick, when like 3 months ago people would shit on you if you took Joe Mixon in the 3rd. So it's like you're trying to incorporate like certain value stuff, and then you're trying to incorporate certain structural stuff. It's a little confusing to me, to be honest. But whatever works for people, I guess.
Here's how I'd maybe simplify it. I don't know. I'm probably not very good at simplifying things, actually, but I think like the zero RB is maybe like it's a really unfortunate name, and that's why I don't say that I like draft from a zero RB perspective. But I guess what what I draft from is I draft with a higher threshold on running back viability, right? So the way I look at it is I'm going into the draft with the mindset that the position that I can purchase points most cost effectively at is essentially RB2, and I treat it like a streamable position. But I also consider tight end and quarterback streamable positions, but it doesn't mean that I'm always going to stream them, right? It still means that I'm going to potentially, if the draft falls to me, draft an early tight end if that's what I want to do, right? I think that tight end is streamable, but it doesn't mean I'm taking Travis Kelce off my board. I think the quarterback is streamable, but I still would consider, a top 5 quarterback if that's what the board allows, or I'm going to try and hit on guys in the late draft that end up being that guy anyway, so I don't have to stream. I think what you're looking for with running back is just a mindset of not about the raw points, but about the irreplaceability factor. And so I think if you can find guys, and it is a little bit subjective, everybody will have sort of their own list, but I think as you go through round to round, sort of identify, okay, what are the guys at which points of the draft that provide me a pathway to a ceiling that's so irreplaceable that I'm actually willing to sacrifice, sort of the safer median of wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like it results in a pretty limited running back draft board just based on the kind of archetypes I want. So to me, it's like in the first round, right? Like just because even if I go in with like a 0 RB mindset, if I get the 101, I'm obviously taking Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. If I get the 102, I'm taking Dalvin Cook. If I get the 103, I'm taking Kamara. And then it's sort of like, okay, Zeke, Henry to me don't have that like super legendary upside compared to the available wide receivers. And then it's like, okay, I look at guys like Taylor and Gibson, and I'm like, yeah, I think that they actually do have that pathway compared to the wide receivers going. So I would detour for them. Mixon, it's kind of fringy, but I think like you can make a case for certain guys, right? Like Swift, for instance, is like a dead zone running back now, right? But I take DeAndre Swift all the freaking time because I think that he has a pathway where you're not buying an RB2 to be your RB2. You're buying him because you think he can be an RB1 at a far reduced cost. And I think like ETN was a good example of that before he got injured. And I think Javonte Williams is still a good example of that, where I think those are guys that have ceilings that are worth making detours for.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely like some of that, but, let's go back to the first round, for example, right? You said, Henry doesn't have that legendary upside, whatever that is. I mean, he was finished as a running back 3, running back 4 in a perfect season. So I would agree. But like then Zeke, you don't think he has a legend upside, but some other people do. So it's like, I think it gets like a little bit tricky because it's like now you are relying on your like skill identification versus like a structural advantage where you're saying, okay, well, I'm just going to go wide receiver here because this is giving me the structural advantage that kind of embraces chaos. So that's why I think it's like, I don't think it's wrong because people are evolving and we're like, you're trying to evolve the strategy from a very, very like rigid into like a more flexible one. But then we're just back to kind of square one, which is what I do is like, dude, I just draft the best players that I think are available at the time. And I don't really have a name for it. And I just kind of draft the best players. And in some years, I'll go RB. Some years I'll go this year. I think, the hero RB was very, very fruitful. So I did a lot of that, but it's just like, it kind of like, you kind of have to add your subjectivity to it. And I think that's fine because at the end of the day, like without that, the game's kind of boring. But I think people like are very obsessed with fitting stuff into like this stringent definition, right? Like 0 RB or robust RB or whatever the fuck you want to call it. In my mind, I'm like, it just seems very pointless. So I try to not get into too many of those conversations because it's not very fruitful for me personally, but I get why people have to write about it because it does give like newer people like a frame of mind to think about stuff. So I kind of see that perspective. But for me, like, another probably more experienced folks as well, it's like I find it all very pointless. That's just my very my very dark take on the whole like
I think that it's fair
debates.
I think it's fair, but I think it's like it's interesting in a way where it's like it's like, oh, like, why would you have to put 0 RB on? Why is it such a structure? But at the same time, I think a lot of it, what it is, at least to me, is it's a lot of breaking down structure, right? Because it's like you have I think like a lot of fantasy players that aren't on Twitter and a lot of fantasy players that are just starting. Like I was on a call with someone who was drafting for their buddy's team, and I was just sort of in a draft that I was in, so I was just kind of like not giving them players. I was just sort of giving them some guidance throughout so they didn't make any, egregious decisions. And a lot of people really think in terms of like, okay, I've got to get my 2 running backs, and then I've got to get my 2 wide receivers, and then I've got to fill my flex, and then I've got to fill my quarterback, my tight end, and my kicker, or my defense, and then I can do the bench. And it's like, right, I think like with zero RB, really like from a very base level, it's just like, actually, no, like you don't have to think about your lineup the way that you see it on the page. Like you can take advantage of things in a different structural way by just placing different thresholds on what you value and placing different thresholds on sort of what you're looking for each spot in terms of their utility to your lineup, instead of just filling spots in your lineup. And so, yeah, I think like it's too bad. I think that at this point, like probably we'll never get to a point where like zero RB is thought of as anything but just like not taking running backs, which is an element of it in a sense. But I don't think that that's like the most important element of it. And maybe it is to some people. And I guess to those people, I would say I don't draft zero RB. And then I guess to people who say it's more of like a structural mindset, then I'd be like, yeah, I do relate to that. So I guess it depends. Like to me, I go into draft, I suppose, just with like my own particular thresholds on what players are worth. And I guess that's really just what everybody else is doing in the same way.
Yeah, for sure. I think, one more thing I want to cover here before we dip off is, there's a ton of stuff that's happened, preseason. There's a ton of, now we have game 1 in the books, right? Like, I want to kind of learn about your process. Like, what are you looking for early on in the season? Like, what would cause you to like start shifting ranks? Like, CeeDee Lamb gets 15 targets. Does that make you say, wow, he's the wide receiver 1 now? Or do you wait like a month, or do you wait a couple weeks to get more data points, trying to identify a trend? Like, how do you know? I always say this, like, overreacting is bad, but underreacting is just as bad. At least in Dynasty, in my opinion, if you don't react at all to news and just say, oh, it's just a game. It's like, oh, it's just a couple games. Like, I mean, a couple games go by, 3-4 games goes by, your quarter of the season is done, right? So in a game with a very limited sample, we have to make, educated guesses based on those limited samples. So like, what are the things you're kind of looking for now heading into week 1? Like after week 1, what are you looking for? What's making you change your mind on players? Is there any particular players that you're trying to look for certain trends for, or what's your thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I'm looking for is really just the younger players, right? Because I think those are the ones that have the most opportunities to value fluctuate. So that's always gonna be where my eye goes first, because I think that's where you have the most opportunity to either secure a very large profit if you can get on the ground floor before someone fully breaks out. Imagine, right? Like I remember last year trading a ton for Metcalf after like week 1 and week 2, because I had a lot of Brown, but I didn't actually have a lot of Metcalf. And I remember early on, I was like, okay, I clearly was not high enough on Metcalf coming into the season, and I was wrong. But I'm going to pay 120 cents on the dollar now, because I'm pretty sure he's going to be worth 150 cents in another month, and he definitely was. I think the biggest thing that I would suggest people do is really think critically and intentionally about what sort of each of these players' upside case is and what is required, right? And so it shouldn't just be like, do they look good? Or it shouldn't be, do they produce well? It should be like, what are the actual core elements that are necessary for a player to reach the ceiling that you're hoping that they have? And you should think about that before, and then you should reflect after on if those were hit. So for someone like Laviska Shenault, for example, right? Like he could have a really good fantasy game in week 1 that actually could make me lower on him going forward, right? So if he goes out and he only plays on 3 wide receiver sets and his ADOT is 4, but he gets 9 targets for 8 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown, like, then that's a situation where I'm like, okay, so my case for Laviska going in was like, all right, he's getting a lot of targets per route. How much of those is just a result of him having a specific gadget role in this offense versus how much of that is one element of his possible role but has the potential to grow? And at this point, we don't fully know, but it's like, how can we look for that in week 1, right? If he goes out, I'm not saying like if he goes out and he doesn't play a bunch of snaps and 2 wide receiver sets, that means he's worthless and he'll never hit a ceiling. But it's like, I would look at it in the sense of like, what if he has a really big game, but he doesn't actually grow his role beyond his priors, and he just has a big game? Because like, if he does just have that role, he's still going to have big games, right? Like that's still going to happen, like it would happen for any player. But at that point, I'd be like, okay, actually, I think that was a negative, but the market's probably going to read it as a positive because they're going to see the box score that he had 24 points. And at that point, I'm like, all right, this might be a good time to sort of get out of Visca shares for what I was willing to buy them for in the summer.
Yeah.
Versus, right, the opposite would be, if he doesn't have that big game, but he's out there running an X wide receiver in 2 wide receiver sets, and he's getting a higher ADOT, and we're seeing some, a larger role increase. So I think that those are the kind of things really, because I think you want to look at the larger picture for a lot of these players. Like, what are the type of usage? What are the type of talent things they need to show? What are the question marks they have that they can check off? And usually you're going to glean a lot more information from that than from their box score, because you can have a lot of random stuff sort of just pop up in the box score.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, don't box score scout. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but just beyond that, looking at how players are used, you can use PFF. PFF probably has a lot. They do have alignment data based on where they line up in the slot on the outside. So if you're trying to look at what type of role a wide receiver is playing, like I think that's a great source to go to. That's what I use when I look at snap counts. I mean, I think not people, but I think generally nerds that are in the fantasy football industry, people that are serious, know to just not to just look at like, number of yards people got, right? At least most people know, look at like targets, right? Because that kind of tells you what their first level opportunity is. But the next step is to kind of look at snaps and where they're lining up, right? So it's a lot of these peripheral things that you're looking for, and you can't overreact to like a box score. And I know it's great. You see your player and they get 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, but you don't get those points again. So at the end of the day, you're trying to solve for what is coming the week after that, and the week after that. So that's kind of why you're trying to dig into a lot of these peripherals. So who are you most excited to see on Sunday?
I'm most excited to see Chase Claypool. I'm most excited to see that whole game.
Yeah.
I think Buffalo was one of the most fun teams to watch. I won't even just say last year. I had more fun watching the Buffalo Bills play football last year than I've ever had watching a football team in my life, other than like the 2004 Colts.
Yeah.
And that's because they were my team. I just watching like what they did to totally reorganize their offense, both in terms of personnel and scheme, to build around Allen's strengths, and really take that shot on allowing him to maximize his utility to the team. I just loved it. Like, it was so fun. I think it was such a great case of talent and scheme and data and just everything coming together. So I can't wait to watch them, period. But I especially can't wait to see what the Steelers team looks like, because they, speaking of Canada, they got Matt Canada, the new offensive coordinator, right? They have Claypool, who I think is one of the most interesting second-year players we've seen, right? His targets per route was absolutely redonk. It was like over 25%. But yet his production, was really good overall, but it was limited, sort of buoyed by a few really large games, and there was a lot of duds in there.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of interesting. It's like, I think when we zoom out on the year one, overall it looks really, really good. But then you sort of zoom out to the college profile and you're like, man, that was kind of questionable. And a lot of the games he was questionable. And so I think it could go in a lot of different directions. I'm super excited to see how he's deployed. I'm excited to see how, when he lines up in 2 wide receiver sets versus when Juju does. I'm excited to see how Big Ben's arm looks. I'm excited to see, Freiermuth and Ebron, how they share snaps. I'm excited to see how Najee Harris looks, because he's a guy that I actually have a lot of questions about. I don't really have questions about his role. He's going to get a ton of touches, but I'm excited to see like how he actually looks and how he actually performs. And is he just a guy who's going to get a bunch of volume, or is he a guy that's really an elevator of his own situation? I think that there's so many fascinating questions we're going to get a little bit of answers to in Pittsburgh, and they're going to do it in probably a really fun, high-scoring game against Buffalo.
Yeah, it's Buffalo Bills have been just really fun. I mean, I completely whiffed on just like that entire offense, whiffed on Josh Allen, obviously. Underrated Diggs, and just completely underrated, like I guess how, like you said, how they built around Josh Allen, gave him the exact tools that he needed, stop running the ball with shitty running backs, and just like went out there and let him sling the rock, right? So, and us analytics nerds, we love it when people go out there and sling the rock, because I mean those are the most plus EV plays. It makes for high scoring games, and it's just a very, very fun game to watch. So I'm definitely with you on there. I think one that I'm super interested in seeing is the Falcons and the Eagles, just because like I want to see if Pitts is all he's set up to be. If he goes out there, if Pitts goes up there and catches like 7-8 balls for like 100 yards, I think like the internet probably shuts down.
He'll also be taken off the trade block for life.
Yeah, he'll just be like, you'll never be able to. If Pitts goes out there and has a game like TJ Hawkinson had in his first week, I don't remember that. After that, everyone's like, this guy's the greatest thing ever. And then obviously he didn't do that much after that. But if Pitts goes out and has one of those games, it's going to be monstrous for Twitter. There's going to be so much victory lapping everywhere. And personally, I don't victory lap.
I'll be running them. I do victory lap.
I don't victory lap after week 1, because like I just know it just comes back and burns you like 3 weeks later. So I try and hold myself, but I'll go out there and I'll be fictitious about it and just poke fun at people. So I'm very interested to see how that storyline plays out. I'm very interested to see how the Calvin Ridley without Julio Jones is a god based on
Yeah.
limited sample size plays out. So I'm like kind of on the fence. I think he's a very good player, and he's gonna get the targets that he's due because he's very good. But I don't know if we're gonna be able to see those monster splits without Julio Jones. And then also I'm curious to see how the offense is without Julio Jones. Because to me, I'm a big believer that Julio Jones was like the ultimate elevator for everyone on his team, and particularly Matt Ryan. Like Matt Ryan without Julio Jones is a slightly richer man's Jared Goff. So I'm kind of interested to see how that offense plays out in its entirety. And then obviously Mike Davis is the workhorse. He's not a workhorse. A lot of interesting storylines on the Falcons side. And then on the Eagles side, you have Jalen Hurts. He's going to go and answer a bunch of questions. Is this guy a starting quarterback, or is he just a fantasy quarterback? And then you got Devonta Smith. I'm sure all of Devonta Smith truthers are waiting to take a victory lap on that one, right? And then you got Jalen Reagor.
Which by the way, I have like had the weirdest journey with Smith. Yeah. Because I was like early on in the process, the legitimate debate was Chase versus Smith. And I was like, it's obviously Chase, which I don't know. He can't figure out a football that doesn't have white stripes. Yeah. It's unfortunate. But so I was like sort of seen as anti-Smith. And I also had Bateman ranked ahead of Smith. And I had Marshall ranked ahead of Smith. And then as we shifted to redraft season, I've just been absolutely mashing Smith. Like he's like my second highest rostered wide receiver in best ball. So it's really weird where then I had this epiphany like 2 weeks before the season where I was like, oh, I care a lot about my dynasty teams. And I just sort of stopped caring about my best ball teams once I draft them. And then I check at the end of the year. Yeah. So I was like, I should probably like trade for some Smith in dynasty because this will really suck if I'm like rooting for this guy in best ball, which I won't even be doing. Yeah. And then he's just not on any of my dynasty rosters. That would be really inconvenient for my own personal rooting enjoyment. Yeah. So I've like boomeranged pretty hard on Smith. Also as a function of me being weirdly high on Hurts. So yeah, we'll see.
So yeah, I mean, look, I'm very interested to see how that storyline plays out. I'm also interested to see Miles Sanders. I mean, I know you and we had debate about Darrell Henderson and Miles Sanders.
Well, I've come around now.
I think going back,
come around now. You win.
I don't think I've won. I mean, we'll see what happens because we saw Kenny Gainwell there and all that stuff. But
I remember the debate. You've won in the sense that I no longer support my side of the debate.
Got it. Yeah, I remember the debate. And
so I might be right, but I'll be wrong either way because I was either wrong then or I'm wrong now. But I'm waving the white flag.
But yeah, I'm interested to see what his workload is, what his involvement is in the receiving end, and whether or not they finally teach Jalen Hurts to check down to him a couple of times. I think that was a big problem last year. It's like, dude, he's open. He's open for a first down, but Jalen Hurts like, no, I'm going to throw this 40-yard bomb and see what happens. So, which is fun for us, but not great for Miles Sanders' fantasy team. So we'll see a lot of interesting storylines to play out. I'm just excited. Football's back. It's back for the first time in a long time. And it feels like we needed this. I mean, the world is shit. It's going into shit or coronavirus fucking everywhere. People are stupid, not wearing masks, not doing whatever. It's been a shit show, but Sundays are sacred. This is the only religion that I've known for years. So I'm definitely looking forward to this. I hope everyone else out there is looking forward to it too. And Jacob, I don't take up too much more of your time. Thanks for hopping on the show, but please tell the people again, just where to find you, how to support your work, how to support you by following you or whatever you're doing on Player Profiler. Just let them know what the best way is to kind of get at you.
Yeah, man, thanks so much. I had a blast coming on and doing this. I've wanted to come on your show forever, so this was super, super fun. You can find me on Twitter, ff_RTDB, and you can find me on various podcasts from Runner Circle on Wednesday, and then into the Full Tilt Network on Friday for the Dynasty show, and then Saturday for the DFS show. And you can find my columns up on playerprofiler.com. As soon as I hang up the phone with you, I will be putting the finishing touches on the first edition of the Pareto Principles, my tournament DFS column. I really try to push it to as late as possible so that I have maximum information, such as Gus Edwards going down with the torn ACL before I write my DFS column. So I'll be writing that into the wee hours of the night. Super excited to have that out probably tomorrow or Saturday. And you can find me always on Twitter. I'll be posting about how bad Zeke looks, even if he's getting 150 yards. That's like a constant. And I'll be posting usually a lot about different metaphors with economics, philosophy, Shakespeare. We'll work it all into articles in the most zany ways possible. So I'd appreciate anyone, if you love the stuff that Mike does, come check me out, and we'll see if we can have fun this season together. I'm excited for some football.
Yeah, definitely. Make sure you guys follow Jacob. Check out the links. I'll drop all the links in the videos below as per usual. But make sure you guys follow him at ff_RT_blah at FF_RTDB on Twitter. Just a great follow. A lot of good content coming your way. So again, thanks for coming on the show, man. I'm really glad that we were able to make this work. I know we weren't able to get on your show, but I'm happy to kind of have you on here, and I'll be glad to have you on again in season. You know, once we've had some weeks to go through and we can come back on here, confirm all of our priors, and ignore all the stuff where we were wrong, which is the best part of fantasy football, obviously. And I'll have you back on the show for then. But until then, man, thanks for hopping on. It's been great.
Absolutely, pleasure is mutual for sure.
All right, so those of you guys, if you enjoyed the show, hop on down, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up, hit the notifications button so you can see cool videos like this. And then lastly, you know, if you want to up your Dynasty game, hop on over to the Patreon. We're living strong over there, patreon.com/ourpack. About 300 to, you know, whatever, 350 people in there. We got the alpha pack going on. We just did like the startup draft, just finished that like just in time. We surprisingly, it was a 24 team league, and we did the draft in like a week and a half, which is insane. Like a 30-round Devy draft. It was actually wild. We were just like, people were on top of it, and trades were flying fast, and like picks were flying fast. It was actually a really good time. So I'll make a video on that probably in the coming weeks, just to like shit on people and their draft picks and just make fun of them, just because, I mean, that's a good thing to do. So but yeah. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, peace out.